board, and off we go. So if you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm John Martinka, Nokomis Advisory Services, and we work with lower middle market businesses to get them ready, but really to have them exit. The company is myself and my daughter Jessica, and we have one other associate, and we're based out of the Seattle area, although we have had clients in almost 20 states.
Great. And tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into the M&A world?
Serendipity. A person I became a good friend with from a Rotary Club I was in many years ago. We were back-to-back presidents. He's a bit older than me. We were younger than many of the other members, and we hit it off. And one day he said something along the lines of, "I've always thought you'd be good in this business." And one thing led to another. He knew I liked but didn't love what I was doing, and this has been great. Help a lot of people buy and sell companies, change their lives, and fairly rewarded for it.
Yeah, and how? I'm always interested in family businesses. At what point did your daughter get involved?
Jessica's been with me about 6 or 7 years now, learning a lot. COVID hurt her. She's very outgoing and loves to get out and meet people. And of course, there's a couple years people didn't want to meet. We make a good team.
Nice. And so, yeah, tell me a bit. You've written a book recently.
Recent book, 5 books. The most recent one, and Jessica collaborated on it, is called Exit with Style, Grace, and More Money.
Okay, so what gave you the idea to write the book, and kind of talk me through the main topics that you cover in there?
Okay, so the idea is let's face it, it's a marketing tool for us. It's not going to be a bestseller like Daniel Silva or Stephen King or anything like that, but it does prove expertise. And it's actually a follow-up to a book I wrote many years ago on prepping a business for sale called "If They Can Sell Pet Rocks, Why Can't You Sell Your Business for What You Want?" which is a lot on what do you do up until it's time to sell. And this one covers a little bit on the preparation, and then what is the process? What do you have to watch out for? What's going to frustrate you? What's going to thrill you? And I'll share the first chapter is very, very important, and it talks about very little, if anything, about the business. But the owner of a business, whether it's going to sell for $1 million, 10 million, 20, 30, they need to be ready themselves. They need to have talked to a financial advisor. They need to know what they're going to do when they sell. And if the selling is retire and not do much, does their spouse want them around 24/7?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, so much of this world is about the people and the relationships that they build, and the impact that the process has on them. And I've certainly known quite a few people who've gone through the sale process and have come out the other end, and it has not been the way they expected it to be at all. And sometimes people have really struggled, despite having kind of made some money, and kind of, by society's sort of, view of things, been successful. But I've seen it time and time again that doesn't actually translate to how these people end up feeling about these things. I don't know whether you've experienced similar things.
I have seen that. I can share that we screen people pretty well, and we want to make sure they know what's upcoming. And too often it's an impulse decision. I like to use the analogy of too many owners, and I don't care if they're in Europe, the US, or anywhere around the world, they don't get up one day and say, "I think I want to sell in 3 years. Let's raise the dimmer switch, make the business bright and shiny for a buyer." They say, "This was a bad month. Flip the switch. Let me sell." And that's when you run into seller remorse.
Right. Yeah, because you end up yes, you haven't taken the steps that you need to get the business into
That's right.
into shape. So is the book kind of, is it based on a series of case studies, or how have you kind of structured it?
Like my other books, it is filled with little vignettes, stories of what people did right and what people did wrong. And
I'd love to hear some of those. Have you got any to mind?
well, one that always comes to mind is uh, is a client who he hired me. This is before my daughter was working with me, and he had a couple qualified people approach him to buy his business, and it was worth uh, you know high, as I recall, it was worth high seven figures. Uh, and we are talking to him, and they made an offer. And he's all of a sudden, he says to me, without them there, he says, "I guess I better tell my wife." And that did not go over well. Not because he was selling, but because he didn't trust her to talk to her about it as he was going through all these conversations, which took over a few months.
Yeah.
Uh, he was at the point he was burned out on running a business and working. He wanted to go fishing more. We actually sold it to his general manager 5 years later at a much reduced price.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um, that's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the sort of the valuation thing is interesting. Like, what do you think affected the valuation? You know, at the time where he got that first offer, and then where he ended up selling it to his general manager.
no, basically he wasn't paying attention to the business. And he had brought this general manager in a couple of years before the general manager bought it, and the general manager was helping it, fixing it, but he had just lost interest, and again would sooner be fishing. And he had made a lot of money. He was still making decent money, uh, but just human error.
Yeah.
Didn't do the things he had done before.
So when it comes in that situation, when it comes to selling to an employee, how was that deal structured? And how did the general manager kind of raise the funds to be able to buy the business?
General manager had some money, and then he used a bank loan.
Right. Would that be an SBA loan or?
It was an SBA loan. Now, if this owner had sold to the parties prior, it would have been out of the SBA range here,
Mhm.
and would have been a different kind of financing. Although it would have been bank debt, of course.
Yeah. So in terms of what you do, is it the which other kind of specialists do you bring in? Like how much of the process do you run, and who else do you work with?
We quarterback things for one. We match make things prior to that, maybe, or conjunction. Um, I can say with just a little bit of a smile that it's sometimes I think of myself as a quasi therapist. It's a very emotional journey for both buyers and sellers. And actually, that brings me to another quick story. Um, and we had matched a seller with a buyer. They hit it off so well. I mean, this is a relationship game in small businesses. I will tell you, as a little sidebar, almost everyone we work with, and a lot of owners out there, legacy, taking care of the employees, is just as important as the money. And these guys hit it off very well. Very successful executive, uh, successful business owner. The friendship actually became too much because the deal was stalling. They were having too much fun together, playing golf, et cetera, et cetera. We sat down in a coffee shop, and I said to the buyer, it's really hard to find a good, mature, profitable business that's fairly priced and where you can relate to the owner, and you have one. I said to the seller, it's really tough to find a buyer who can run your business, has the money, and you trust to preserve your legacy. You guys need to get it together and get the deal done. The buyer said after a little bit, think we can get it done by the end of the month? This was like the 15th. I said, nah, that's a little too fast, but end of next month. And they did it. So that therapy you sometimes it's pushing,
Yeah.
sometimes it's pulling back.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and have you ever seen it kind of it break down? Have you ever seen kind of deals fall apart and like
Anyone in my business that says they haven't is not telling the truth. Things happen. Financing gets in the way. Uh, uh, business doesn't keep performing as it has been, so their numbers aren't what they were when the offer was made, or a key customer leaves, or deal fatigue.
mm,
Just it's taken so long, and whether it's the diligence or the seller, if the seller doesn't respond promptly, they still blame the buyer for delaying things. So the buyer
yeah,
says, "I need these 14 items." They get them 10. They keep bugging him or her, and they don't get them, but the seller blames the buyer for stalling.
yeah. What do you think the market is like right now in the small and medium business arena in the US?
Right now, it's pretty good. We don't work in the what I call the main street micro businesses. No delis, no dry cleaners, florist
Right.
shops, things like that. Uh, so it's mostly B2B that we get our clients. Uh, they're going to be valued anywhere from a few $1 million to 20 million. We stay away from what the investment bankers are doing, and we stay away from the main street. We don't want to do what the main street brokers do, which I think is always a vibrant market for people truly buying a job, not the job of a CEO. And it's pretty good. Uh, it's good if you have a mature, profitable business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Do you
it's always a seller's market for a good business. It's a
Yes.
buyer's
Well, I
market
was going to ask
if
that. Do you
allowed.
think it's more of a buyer's market or a seller's market at the moment?
Yep. Sellers always will be and has been a seller's market for a good business. It's a buyer's market for a lousy business.
um,
Someone who just has to get out.
and what kind of industries are you? Do you kind of are you industry agnostic or what kind of business? You said sort of B2B, but kind of which
Industry
section?
agnostic.
Yeah.
Uh, um, we don't do doctors and dentists and things like that. Chiropractors. Uh, that's a separate world. Uh, some of our more recent deals are a general contractor, which was a tough one, but we found a perfect match. A digital transformation company, pretty really good sized manufacturer's rep business. We're currently working with a company in the recycling industry,
Okay.
uh, a manufacturer. We'll just call it a job shop contract manufacturer,
Yeah.
machine and coatings, and a proprietary product manufacturer. So all over the
Okay.
board.
And so the digital transformation is it, so a lot of my listeners are in the creative agency and marketing world. So I'm interested in that digital transformation business and what they did and who they ended up selling to.
Well, they ended up selling to a group of three people. It's an interesting story because the seller said from the first meeting, we met over a cup of coffee, I have 10 employees. I'm making a lot of money. I don't want to manage any more people. I can't do it. Don't like it. He ended up staying on. We had lunch a few weeks ago, and he said, "Yeah, there's been a few little hiccups, but I'm having more fun than I've had in years in business because I'm doing just what I want to do, which is customer strategy, generating customers, not doing HR and all the administrative stuff." His company,
Mm.
you so if I wouldn't, someone like me would not go to them and say redo my website. They would be overkill. They are doing a lot of things for medium to large companies, mostly. A lot of sensitive information, or specialists in sensitive information. like medical information. Here it's in the States, it's called HIPAA, which is, if you have someone's medical information, it had better be secure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Robust shopping sites, things like that.
So the seller in that instance was just motivated because he'd ended up in a position that where he wasn't doing the work that he loved anymore,
That's
and
right.
and and then okay. Um, sorry, that was 1 second. Um, sorry. There we go. Just mark that. Yeah. And what do you and it- what kind of impact do you think the sort of upcoming AI revolution is having on business owners? Do you think that it's something that people are concerned by and are therefore thinking of perhaps selling before things change too much?
Well, there's a lot of businesses AI is not going to drastically change. AI is not going to build a widget. AI is not going to build a building. Uh,
Yeah,
it does help with like the digital transformation business that they can do more with the same amount of people or fewer people.
yeah,
Uh, and there are so many uses for it. We will use it to get ideas on things and then refine them because it's all right there. You don't have to think what are the top 10 things about this. You put it in AI, say what are the top 15 things. You can pick 10 or add a couple they didn't come up with, and just change the language because most people can tell if it's written by AI
yeah. Oh yeah,
versus a human.
yeah.
Uh, but we've used it to give us the base of an ad and marketing pieces to sell a business.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they did a really good job on one of them after we took out all the sales language that sounded like it was from the 1960s. The best deal ever.
What's your view on this idea of the silver tsunami? This idea that uh, boomers have kind of owned businesses, are coming up to retirement age, and that there's suddenly going to be a kind of flood of businesses available on the market because they can't find sellers for them. Do you have a view on how realistic that is?
Oh, definitely. And I'll go back in time because it was about 2007 or 2008 that the Wall Street Journal had uh, uh, a number of things on this, and they said that number one, only 10% of businesses are ready to sell for maximum value. We can talk a little bit about what goes into that, but they also said there's going to be like, and I don't know the exact numbers in that one, but just say about 70% of small, medium-sized businesses are going to change hands in the next 10 years. You fast forward a few years and 3 or 4 years, and there was something I can't remember exactly where they were, said the same thing. Like 2/3 of businesses are owned by baby boomers and they are going to sell in the next 10 years. And then a few years after that, it was the same thing from another source. And what got in the way of that tsunami, and actually I got sucked in a bit, and I actually wrote an article for my alma mater's business magazine on the tsunami of businesses for sale, and it never happened because the Great Recession in 2008, 9, 10 delayed things. And then I think if you were to go back to right before COVID, we had about 10 years of really strong business. And again, I somewhat jokingly will say, if you asked owners in 2019, early 2020, how'd you do during the recession? Many of them would have said, recession? What recession? Memories are short. And, since COVID, yeah, it's picking up. I don't think we're going to see a tsunami. I think we're just going to see a steady increase in businesses that owners are going to want to or have to sell.
Yeah.
Age gets in the way, health issues, a spouse saying, I want to see our grandkids more, and they live quite a ways away, etc.
Yeah. So what are your kind of top tips on things that people can do to maximize the value of their
Yeah.
business?
So if we go back to that, 10% are ready and 90% are, I look, there's a lot of information out there uh, about what are value drivers. What does it really mean? And I could make a list of top 20, but I focus on 7. And number one, and actually I'll say number one because it's so important. Most of them in any order have good financial systems so you have accurate financial statements. And part of that is don't blend the business and personal checkbook.
Yeah.
So we were working on a deal a couple years ago, and our client had a facility in France. And what I learned in France is that in France, the government has access to your accounting system all the time. There are no funny games played with, writing off your spouse's car or taking a trip and writing it off with the business.
It
Buying things
doesn't
for your
really
boat.
happen very much in the UK either.
Yeah,
Not, I think it does a little bit, but compared to the US,
yeah,
it's just a completely
yeah,
different sort of mindset, I think. And in the US, people are much more willing to run a load of personal expenses through a business.
yeah. Our last three deals had no funny business in their financial statements at all. I think the only thing, one of them had a top-heavy pension plan, which we are allowed, it can happen here, but it's so explainable that it's nothing nefarious.
Hmm.
Our current clients, let's see, no personal expenses, uh, no personal expenses. One of the clients said, I can't, my controller won't let me even if I wanted to. So that's a good seller. Uh, is you want to have accurate statements. Another big one is reduce the dependency on the owner, which means build a management team, delegate. The last thing any buyer, and I've seen it I was at a presentation earlier this year, and there's a company that sold for about $70 million. And one of the owners said, we realized when we started the process, we were too important to the business. At that size,
Mm.
delegate,
Yeah.
get people. Uh, Another one is grow. Don't just say you can grow, show that you can grow. Because buyers are skeptical by nature. They've heard, after a while, you hear every story.
Yeah. Well, there's that sort of, 20% top and bottom line should be the target for any
Yeah,
business. 20% growth year on year and 20% EBITDA.
yeah. Uh, Hire and retain great people. Again, ties into having a good management team, but also below them, have good people who are looking to grow and elevate their careers with you. Um, Talked about owner dependency. Another one is just dependencies in general. Don't have a key customer at like 20,
Mm.
25, 30%. 3 customers are 80%. Be careful with suppliers, or uh, you don't want to have one supplier that could turn off the spigot.
Mm.
I coached or consulted with a company many years ago. He was a sales agency. He had one key vendor, manufacturer. They grew. They said, we're too big for you. He was in a world of hurt. Did he learn his lesson? No, because a number of years later, he called me and said, help me again. He had one key manufacturer who decided they were getting too big for him. Landlord can be an issue.
Yeah.
You don't, no buyer wants to have a loan longer than the lease because the landlord kicks you out, raises the rates tremendously. What are you going to do? And there's uh, the I call it the 3 I's: IP, IT, and incentives.
Mm.
So you
Okay.
take care of your IT, cybersecurity. Get IT you can use. I'm on the board of a company, and the ERP system has been a bit of an albatross since they put it in a few years ago. They don't use it anywhere close to what they could. and that's money out the door. And of course, IP if you have intellectual property, and then incentives. And we talked about stories. The good one is a deal. The owner, nice guy, really was into making every last dollar. And I know that the buyers that bought his company, was a good sized deal, came in, revamped the incentive program and compensation program for the employees. It was mostly inside sales, and they were able to make more money, and they grew at 75% the first year. This guy left a lot of money on the table by worrying about a few dollars.
Mm.
And then finally, see the big picture. Know where you're going and how you're going to get there. And, we talked about growth, and you said 20%. I know someone who was he was a president of one of the divisions of Expedia. And I remember him saying, growth hides a lot of operational warts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get the growth going, then fix the warts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, if you haven't got your eye on the bottom line, then you're just pouring more water into a leaky bucket.
Yep.
I like those. Yeah, those are 7 very sensible things to focus on.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, that feels like quite a nice note to wrap things up on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
Okay.